"Let me make one thing clear, Chief," the lieutenant said, his voice cutting through the hangar like a blade. "I don't care what kind of special assignments you've had or who you think you are. In my unit, you earn your place. And right now, you're nothing but dead weight." The words echoed through Hangar Bay 4, bouncing off the steel walls like ricochets. The morning heat had already turned the air thick and heavy, a mix of oil, jet exhaust and salt drifting in from the Pacific. A ring of young sailors stood around, pretending to stay busy while watching everything. Their faces shone with sweat, their nervous laughter breaking the silence like cracks in glass. At the center stood Chief Petty Officer Grace Hale, hands behind her back, chin lifted just enough to meet his gaze. Her expression, unreadable. Lieutenant Harris took a step closer. His uniform looked fresh-pressed, starched to perfection, as if authority could be ironed in. The silver bar on his collar gleamed under the hangar light. His pride filled the space louder than the jet engines outside. Grace didn't move, didn't blink. Only the faintest twitch in her jaw gave away that she was still breathing. He smirked, mistaking her silence for fear. "You're lucky I even let you run my drills. Next time you slow down my team, I'll have you reassigned to infantry with the other misfits." If stories of quiet courage and real warriors move you, hit subscribe. There's more like this waiting to be heard. Let's get back to the story. Then it happened. Quick, sharp and sudden, his hand cut through the air and struck her across the jaw. A clean hit. Not hard enough to knock her down, but hard enough to make the sound echo across the hangar like a warning shot. Every head turned. Every mouth went dry. The slap wasn't just sound. It was hierarchy, ego, disrespect, all rolled into one violent moment that froze everyone in place. Grace Hale's head turned with the impact. She inhaled once, slowly, then straightened her uniform. Her voice was calm, controlled. "Are you finished, Lieutenant?" That's all she said. For a full 5 seconds, no one moved. Even the overhead fans seemed to hesitate. The only sound was the distant rumble of the ocean and the soft clatter of a wrench falling somewhere in the back. Harris took a half-step back, realizing too late how quiet it had become. The faces around him weren't amused anymore. The young sailors he'd been trying to impress were staring at him like they'd just seen something they shouldn't have. Grace didn't wait for his reply. She turned slowly, walked across the hangar floor, and disappeared into the corridor leading toward the operations wing. The silence she left behind was heavier than the strike itself. From the shadowed doorway, a figure had been watching, Fleet Master Chief Rourke. He didn't say a word, but his eyes followed her as she walked away. He noticed the way her steps never faltered, the way she carried her bruised jaw like a badge, not a wound. He'd seen that kind of poise before, long ago, in a desert war zone, in people who'd already survived worse things than arrogance. As Grace disappeared down the corridor, Rourke's voice broke the silence. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "you just made a mistake you can't unmake." Harris stiffened, trying to sound confident. "With respect, Master Chief, she's insubordinate. I don't tolerate weakness." "That wasn't weakness," Rourke interrupted. His tone was like gravel, slow, deliberate. "That was restraint, and you'd better pray you never find out what she's restraining." The old sailor walked off, leaving Harris standing there, surrounded by silence, confusion and a fear he couldn't quite name. Outside, gulls screamed over the flight line. The morning drills resumed, but something in the rhythm of the base had changed. People whispered as Grace passed. Some looked away, others looked twice. She said nothing to anyone, just returned to her duties, reviewing reports, inspecting equipment, correcting mistakes, without raising her voice. But every now and then, when the light hit her jaw at the right angle, that faint red mark would catch someone's eye and remind them of what they'd seen that morning. The mark wasn't just a bruise. It was a promise, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't need to shout. That night, the base went quiet early. Even the gulls seemed to respect the stillness that settled over Coronado like fog. The day's training logs were filed, lights dimmed across the barracks, and the rhythmic hum of distant generators replaced the chatter of sailors. Chief Grace Hale sat alone on the far end of the pier. where the waves broke softly against the pylons. A paper cup of coffee rested beside her boot. Steam drifted upward, vanishing into the cold night air. She wasn't one for reflection. Years in the field had trained it out of her. But silence had its way of digging up old ghosts. Faces, names, places she'd tried to leave behind in classified reports and sealed envelopes. A whisper of footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. Couldn't sleep either. The voice was low, rough around the edges. Fleet Master Chief Rourke. Grace gave a faint smile. You always patrol the docks at midnight, Master Chief. Only when someone shakes the whole damn base before noon, he replied. He stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back, looking out toward the black horizon. The lights of the carrier offshore blinked faintly like distant stars. For a while, neither spoke. The sea did the talking, soft, endless, patient. Finally, Rourke broke the silence. You could have dropped him. Grace didn't answer. I saw it in your stance. You read him like a manual. One move and that officer would have hit the deck before he knew what happened. She took a sip of coffee, still not looking at him. That's not what the Navy pays me for. Maybe not, Rourke said quietly. But restraint like that? It's rarer than skill these days. Grace looked out toward the water, her reflection faint on the surface. Doesn't matter. He's already building a case. Tomorrow it'll be paperwork, witnesses, and inquiry. Same old dance, Rourke chuckled softly. You think that scares me? I've seen officers like him come and go. They make noise, pull rank, and then crumble when the mission gets real. You don't make noise. She turned to face him finally, eyes steady. You think silence wins wars? No, he said, but it keeps you alive long enough to win them. They stood there for a long time. The kind of silence that isn't empty, just full of things left unsaid. When Rourke left, Grace remained. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the faint metallic scent of the ocean. Somewhere offshore, a ship's horn echoed once, long and low. Her fingers brushed the small silver pendant beneath her uniform collar. The edges were worn smooth. The initials engraved there, A.H., almost invisible now. She closed her eyes for a moment. And there it was again, that flash of memory. A desert airfield, the smell of burning fuel. The sound of gunfire swallowed by distance, and a voice, calm, commanding, and saying, Stay low, Chief. I've got your 6. Then silence, and the memory faded, leaving only the cold. Next morning, the hangar buzzed again with routine. Briefings, drills, paperwork, all under the surface tension that hadn't lifted since yesterday. Lieutenant Harris kept his distance. His smile had vanished, replaced with clipped commands and nervous glances. Every sailor had seen it. The story of the slap and her stillness spread faster than official memos ever could. Grace moved through the day like nothing had happened. Her tone calm, her posture perfect, her eyes hidden behind dark lenses. When the 0900 inspection rolled around, Rourke stood beside her. He didn't need to say anything. His presence alone was enough to keep Harris cautious. Halfway through the inspection, a young recruit dropped a piece of equipment, an aluminum wrench clattering across the floor. Harris barked, You call that discipline, sailor? The recruit froze. Grace stepped forward before the tension could grow teeth. He's new, sir, she said evenly. I'll handle his correction. Her tone was professional, but the unspoken line in it was clear. Not again. Harris stared at her for a long moment, then simply nodded and turned away. When the inspection ended, Rourke leaned closer to her. You just saved his career. Maybe your own too. Grace didn't reply, but as she walked out of the hangar, her reflection in the glass door caught her eye again. That faint mark on her jaw, fading now, looked almost gone. Almost outside, a C-130 roared overhead, its wings slicing through the bright California sky. Grace watched it for a moment, the sunlight glinting off its fuselage. Her lips moved, barely audible. Stay low, Chief. I've got your 6. It wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a promise she hadn't yet fulfilled. And deep down, she knew the past she thought she'd buried was about to find its way back to her. The message arrived just after dawn. Encrypted, marked eyes only. Chief Grace Hale was mid-run, boots hitting the shoreline as the Pacific morning wind stung her face. The sea had always been her metronome, every crash of the wave syncing with her breath, every gust of salt air reminding her that chaos could still feel pure. When she saw the base courier waiting near her jeep, she slowed, grabbed the towel from the hood, and wiped the sweat from her neck. "For you, Chief, straight from command. No one sent paper anymore." But this was paper. A single folded memo sealed in red. She broke it open right there. Subject: Special Assignment Recall, Location, Classified Forward Operating Area, Red Sand. Authorization: Fleetmaster Chief Rourke personnel requested, hail. Her pulse didn't spike. She just stared at the page, the calm before a storm she thought would never return. Red Sand. She hadn't heard that name in 4 years. The briefing room was empty, except for Rourke when she entered. His posture was stiff, his expression heavier than usual. "You read it?" he asked. "I did." He nodded slowly, tapping the file on the table. "They want a shadow team assembled. 1 week notice. It's off the books. What kind of op?" "Extraction. Humanitarian on paper. But intel says otherwise." She tilted her head slightly. "How otherwise?" Rourke hesitated, then slid a photograph toward her, a man's face. Sand-colored fatigues, eyes sharp, familiar. Her hand froze halfway to the table. "AH," she whispered. "He's alive, Grace." For a long moment, the hum of the overhead lights was the only sound. AH. Aaron Hale, her brother, declared KIA in a classified mission 3 years ago. The same mission that had burned her file, ended her team, and sent her into the quiet life of base training duty. "Intel got a ping from a contact in the region," Rourke continued. "Said a U.S. operative matching his description was seen near a militia border camp. No official record, no chain of command acknowledgement, but someone doesn't stay missing that long unless someone wants them that way," she finished. Rourke's eyes met hers. "Exactly." Outside the room, morning drills thundered on, recruits shouting cadence, the clang of steel against steel. But inside, the air was thick, motionless. Grace leaned back in her chair. "Why me?" "Because you're the only one he'd trust to come for him," Rourke said quietly. "And because nobody else would survive the trip." She looked down at the photo again. Her brother's face, older now, rougher, but unmistakable. "If this is a setup, then it's a damn good one," Rourke admitted. "But Command's giving us green light to form a small extraction unit. You 2 operators and a local fixer." Grace exhaled slowly. The last time she'd seen Aaron, they'd been side by side in a helicopter, the desert below them burning orange under the sun. He'd been smiling even then. "We don't die easy, sis," he'd said. She'd believed him. Until the silence proved her wrong. Later that night, she packed without hesitation. The same gear, same worn duffel, same dog tag she never stopped carrying. Each motion deliberate. Boots, gloves, sidearms, satellite rig. The base outside her window glowed faintly under sodium lights. Somewhere in the distance, the sea lapped against the pier where she'd stood the night before. Her phone buzzed. A single message from Rourke. "Wheels up Aero 600, keep this quiet. Harris doesn't need to know." A faint smile touched her lips. "Wouldn't want to wake the lieutenant," she murmured, as she zipped the bag. Her gaze caught the small photo taped inside the lid. Her brother, laughing in uniform, sand whipping across his face. She touched the image lightly. "You better be alive, Aaron," she whispered, "because I'm coming." Then she closed the bag. And in that instant, the woman who'd stayed quiet, patient, obedient, ceased to exist. The chief who once led men through hell had just returned. The roar of the C-130 Hercules split the dawn sky like thunder. Inside, the air was cold, metallic, vibrating with the low hum of engines and the silent anticipation of men who knew too well what they were flying into. Grace Hale sat strapped in, eyes closed beneath the red glow of the cabin lights. Across from her, 2 operators, Petty Officer Brooks and Sergeant Mace Dillard, checked and rechecked their gear with the obsessive rhythm of veterans who didn't trust luck. Neither spoke much. They'd heard the rumors that this mission wasn't on record, that Command wanted it quiet, maybe even forgotten. Grace opened her eyes slowly, feeling the vibration under her boots. The sound of the aircraft was a low growl, steady, unflinching. "ETA 30 minutes," came the pilot's voice through the intercom. "Landing zone hot. Expect dust and low vis." "Copy," Grace replied, voice calm as always. Brooks looked up from his pack. "Chief, this thing feel off to you?" She met his eyes. "Every mission that matters feels off." Mace chuckled low, the kind of laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Ain't that the truth?" Below them stretched the endless red wasteland of the desert, dunes rising like frozen waves under the breaking sun. Their landing zone was nothing more than a strip of cracked clay near a dry riverbed. When the plane's wheels hit the ground, dust erupted in a violent plume that swallowed everything. The ramp lowered. Heat slammed into them like a wall. Grace stepped out first, boots sinking slightly into the red dust that had earned the region its code name. At the far end of the strip stood an old pickup and a man leaning against it, their fixer. "That's our contact," Grace said. Rourke's voice crackled faintly over her comms from back at base. "Name's Hamid. He's been on the ground for 2 years. Knows the terrain, the locals, and where the ghosts hide." The man waved as they approached. His clothes were dust-stained, his face weathered, his expression cautious. "You must be Hale," he said in accented English. "Depends who's asking," Grace replied evenly. Hamid's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The one who wants you alive." By the time they loaded into his truck, the desert was awake, heat waves rippling across the horizon, wind carrying fine red grit that found its way into every fold of fabric. As they drove, Hamid spoke over the engine noise. "Your brother was here, near the border outpost. Helped locals defend a convoy 6 months ago. Then gone. No body, no trail. You saw him?" she asked. Hamid nodded once. "Saw him fight. He saved 12 people that day. Told me his sister would come for him." Brooks glanced at Grace from the back seat, quiet awe in his eyes. Mace just muttered, "Hell, that's something." Grace said nothing. She just stared at the horizon, at the endless sea of red dust and the faint outline of distant ruins that shimmered like ghosts in the heat. By dusk, they'd reached the outpost, abandoned, walls pitted with bullet holes. An American flag half buried in sand. Grace moved through the compound like a ghost, clearing corners, scanning for any sign of recent use. Her flashlight caught something on the wall, a faded marking scratched into the stone, A.H., and beneath it, a date. She traced the letters with her glove. "He was here," she whispered. Brooks crouched beside her, frowning. "But where'd he go?" That's when they heard it, a faint hiss of static through her earpiece. Rourke's voice again, distant and low. "Chief, we've got movement near your position. Multiple signals. Not friendlies." Grace straightened. "How many?" "At least 6. Maybe more." The air tightened. The team took positions, weapons low and steady. Dust swirled around the compound as silhouettes appeared against the fading light, armed, deliberate, closing in from the ridgeline. Grace didn't shout, didn't panic, just whispered, "Lights out. Stay low." The firefight that followed wasn't loud, it was precise. Controlled bursts. Short commands. 3 minutes that felt like an hour. When the last echo faded, only wind remained. Hamid emerged from behind a broken wall, coughing through the dust. "They weren't militia," he said. "Their gear, it's Western. American issue." Grace looked down at one of the fallen attackers. Chest rig, night optics, and no insignia. Her jaw tightened. "Then someone doesn't want us finding Aaron." Brooks kicked the sand over the man's weapon. "You think this was a hit?" Grace holstered her rifle. "No," she said softly. "This was a warning." That night, under a blood-red moon, the small team camped in silence. The wind howled across the dunes like a living thing, carrying the scent of burnt gunpowder and loss. Grace sat apart from the others, staring at the distant horizon, where the desert met the stars. Somewhere out there, her brother was alive. Or someone was making damn sure she never found out, and in that stillness she made herself a promise. Not of vengeance, not of pride, but of truth. Whatever it took, she would find him. And whoever tried to bury that truth would learn what a Navy SEAL can really do. The wind had not stopped since nightfall. It tore across the dunes, carrying dust, whispers, and the scent of gun oil. Grace Hale hadn't slept. She sat by the embers of the fire, hands clasped loosely, eyes fixed on the horizon that glowed faintly with the promise of dawn. Every instinct in her body, honed from years of silence and survival, told her the ambush wasn't random. Those men had moved like trained operators, coordinated, precise. Someone had sent them. Behind her, Brooks stirred. "Chief, you've been up all night." "So's whoever's tracking us," she replied quietly. Hamid approached from the ridge, his scarf pulled tight against the wind. He handed her a small black object, a military tracker, half buried in sand. "Found it near the truck," he said. "They tagged you?" Grace turned it over in her palm, the LED still blinking faintly red. Her jaw tightened. "We're burned," Mace said flatly. "They knew our route, our position. Hell, they probably know what we ate for breakfast." Grace looked toward the east, the desert now a soft red under rising sunlight. "Then we stop being hunted," she said, "and start hunting." By noon, they'd tracked the signal's origin to a narrow canyon 2 miles north, a natural funnel of rock and silence. Perfect for concealment. Grace moved ahead, silent, scanning every ledge, every glint of light. Her breath was steady. Her boots barely disturbed the sand. Then she saw it, the shimmer of metal under a tarp, half hidden behind a rock face. A communication relay, American grade. She crouched beside it, examining the serial numbers. Her expression hardened. "This is Navy issue," she said. Brooks frowned. "But it means this didn't come from the enemy." A voice cut through the static of the comms. Familiar, sharp. "Chief Hale, you're off mission." "Stand down immediately," she froze. It was Lieutenant Harris. "What the hell are you doing on this frequency?" she said. "What you're doing, Chief," Harris replied, his tone slick with arrogance. "Running an unsanctioned op halfway across the world? You were supposed to stay put, not chase ghosts." "My brother's alive," she said coldly. "You knew. Your brother died a long time ago. Accept it." She looked up at the ridgeline. The wind carried a faint hum, the kind that came from engines. "Where are you, Lieutenant?" "Close enough to clean up your mess." The first shot cracked the silence. A burst of dust erupted inches from her shoulder. Grace dove behind a boulder as more rounds tore into the canyon walls. "Contact, move!" she shouted. Brooks and Mace returned fire, precise and controlled. Hamid ducked low, shouting coordinates into the comms. From the cliffs above, shadowed figures advanced, the same kind of men who had attacked them before. Same gear, same silence, but Grace was done running. She slid from cover, moving low and fast. Her rifle barked twice, 2 targets down before they even saw her. She shifted positions, never staying still, reading terrain like language. Each breath was measured, each shot deliberate. The lieutenant's voice crackled again, now tinged with panic. "You have no idea what you're walking into, Hale." "No," she said, steady and calm. "You have no idea who you hit in that hangar." Her next shot took out the relay dish, cutting his signal to static. Minutes later, the canyon was silent. Bodies lay still under the rising heat. Brooks approached carefully. "That's the last of them," Grace nodded, scanning the wreckage. Then she saw it. A small transport vehicle parked half-concealed in shadow. She moved closer. The driver's door creaked open and a man stumbled out, beard overgrown, face burned by sun and time. When his eyes met hers, he froze. "Grace?" Her breath caught. "Aaron." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The desert around them seemed to vanish. Then he smiled faintly. "Took you long enough," she exhaled, the tension in her shoulders melting away. But before she could speak, a sound echoed behind her, the crunch of boots on gravel. Harris, gun drawn, uniform disheveled, rage etched across his face. "This is over," he spat. "You're both done. You have no idea what you've just ruined." Grace turned, calm as still water. "You tried to bury a SEAL alive. That's what you ruined," Harris sneered. "You think anyone will believe you?" She took one slow step forward, eyes unwavering. "I don't need them to." Before he could raise his weapon, Aaron moved, faster than anyone could react, disarming him with a clean, practiced motion. The same training, the same precision. The lieutenant hit the ground hard. This time it wasn't a strike of humiliation. It was justice. Aaron handed the sidearm to Grace, his voice calm. "He hit you?" She looked at Harris, motionless in the dust. "He did," Aaron nodded once. "Then let him live with that." By sunset, the canyon was quiet again. Rourke's voice finally came through the comms, heavy with relief. "Grace, report. Mission complete, Master Chief. Target recovered. Truth intact." There was a pause, the kind that says everything words can't. "Good work, Chief," Rourke said softly. "Bring your brother home." Grace looked toward the horizon, where the sky burned gold over the dunes. Her jaw still bore the faint scar from that hangar, faded now but not forgotten. "Let's go home," she said. And as they walked toward the waiting transport, the desert wind carried the final echo of her silence, the kind of silence only earned by those who don't need to prove anything anymore. The transport plane touched down just before sunrise. The base looked the same as when she'd left. Grey hangars, fluttering flags, the ocean mist rolling in like a living thing. But everything felt different now. Grace Hale stepped off first, boots striking the tarmac with quiet certainty. The world hadn't changed, but she had. Beside her walked her brother, Aaron, gaunt, scarred, alive. Every few steps, he glanced around the familiar base, as if trying to believe it wasn't a dream. Waiting at the end of the runway stood Fleet Master Chief Rourke. His weathered face softened the moment he saw them. "Welcome home, Chief," he said quietly. Grace gave a faint nod. "Mission complete, Master Chief." "I heard," Rourke said, glancing at Aaron. "Hell of a miracle you pulled." "No miracle," she replied. "Just truth refusing to stay buried." Inside the command building, the air was heavy with tension. Lieutenant Harris sat across from the investigation board, uniform rumpled, confidence drained. He tried to explain the unauthorized mission, the rogue extraction, the protocol breach, but the evidence spoke louder than his words. The comm logs, the tracking devices, the dead men wearing unmarked American gear, and then the quiet moment that ended it all, when the door opened and Chief Grace Hale walked in. Every head turned. Harris's jaw tightened, the color draining from his face. Grace didn't glare, didn't gloat. She just stood there, calm, composed, the faint scar along her jaw catching the light. "Lieutenant," she said softly, "on my mat you called me a liability. You were wrong." She placed a small folder on the table, the full data from the red sand relay. Proof of his sabotage, his attempts to cover up Aaron's survival, and his involvement in the illegal intercept team. The room went silent. "This isn't vengeance," she said evenly. "It's accountability." Rourke stepped forward, his voice like gravel. "Lieutenant Harris, you're relieved of command." Effective immediately, Harris tried to speak, but nothing came. His pride, that sharp, brittle armor, had finally cracked. As security led him away, his eyes flicked toward Grace. There was no anger now, only the hollow understanding of a man who had learned too late what quiet strength truly looks like. Outside, the day had begun to break open, golden light spilling across the base. Sailors moved about, saluting her as she passed. Some out of respect, others out of awe. She didn't return every salute. Some she simply acknowledged with a nod. Humble, grounded, human. Aaron walked beside her, hands in his pockets, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Still the quiet one, huh?" he teased gently. "Someone has to be," she replied. "Guess I owe you my life. You'd have done the same." "Yeah," he said, looking out toward the sea. "But maybe not as cleanly." They both laughed softly, not the laughter of relief, but of understanding. That evening the hangar was empty again. The same one where it had all started. The same steel floor that once echoed with insult and silence. Grace stood there alone, looking at the training mats. The air smelled of oil, sweat, and memory. She crouched down, brushed her hand over the spot where she had stood weeks ago, where the slap had landed. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished floor. "It never was about proving anything," she whispered. "It was about remembering who I already was." The hangar door groaned open behind her. Rourke's voice carried softly through. "Chief, you did more than bring your brother home. You reminded a lot of people what integrity looks like." She turned slightly, eyes calm. Just did my job, Master Chief. No, he said, shaking his head. You did something harder. You stayed silent when pride told you to shout. That night, as the sun sank beyond the Pacific, Grace walked the pier alone. The ocean wind lifted her hair, the horizon painted in gold and blue. In her pocket, she carried a single folded photo, her and Aaron years ago in uniform, grinning after a mission. She looked at it, then out at the waves. For every woman and man who was ever underestimated, she murmured, may they never have to prove twice what others take for granted. She folded the picture, tucked it away, and turned back toward the base, steady, sure, silent, and the narrator's voice closed in quiet reflection. True strength doesn't shout. It stands, it waits, it endures. And when the time comes, it reminds the world what quiet power really means. If this story moved you, share it. Not for recognition, but for the ones who serve with silence. Grace, an unshakable honor.